Okay, everyone, I think we'll get going here. As I said, thank you all for joining the call tonight. Joining our junior squash information session, we'll be recapping the season. With me tonight, we have Harry Smith, who's our Director of Junior Development, and we have Kevin Cliffstein, who's our President and CEO. So I'll start with Kevin and ask him to say a few words, and then we'll go into the presentation.
Thank you, Kim. And I just wanted to thank everybody for calling in tonight and being part of this junior squash community. I wanted to thank the U.S. squash staff. I want to thank Kim Clearkin and Harry Smith, Ryan Leslie, Monisha Das, and Linda Riani, all of whom put in a lot of effort towards this junior squash programming. And I know we'll be hosting some additional calls, one including June 13th, which is about the junior national teams and the selection processes really going into next season already. And we have an annual meeting of the members on June 21st. So I encourage you to join and participate in that and get an overview of where things are with the organization overall. And so I would just say that for this call, it's been quite an effort to work through and come back from COVID for everybody, I know. And we're clearly not escaping that in any way, shape, or form as an organization. And it's never too far from my mind, at least in terms of just appreciating the fact that we have worked through it and that things are a lot brighter in terms of the future. And we appreciate what we do and really has caused us to look back pretty closely in terms of our mission, and which is ultimately summarized in lifelong positive engagement in squash. And so Kim and the team, they'll outline essentially where we ended up in this last season, provide some updates and a bit of indication in terms of where things are going in the future. But what I think you'll notice in this presentation and in our communications as we move forward and into next season is the same theme, and that same theme is around sportsmanship and character. And what we recognize in encouraging and supporting lifelong positive engagement in squash is that sportsmanship is such an important part of the culture and really connects to just about every aspect of the sport. And we all have a role in perpetuating that positive culture. That includes parents, those of you who are coaches on the call, the officials, obviously us as the governing body, and of course the competitors, the players, the juniors themselves. And so you'll see us come back to this theme and communicate on it in a very positive way, as well as what we're doing to do what we can to make sure we have a positive culture within the sport. So I want to thank you again for being part of the community, being part of this session, and I'll hand it back to you, Kim. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So as Kevin said, tonight we're going to start with a recap of the 2022-2023 season. We have some data we'd like to share with you so you can see what the trends were and how we're doing compared to where we were when we stopped about 3 years ago. We'll go through the junior ranking system and how that is working and how it works as well, with some discussion around some potential policy adjustments that we'll be making this season and things that we have been considering but have yet to come to any conclusion, and we'll be socializing those ideas throughout the season. Harry will talk a little bit about the accreditation process and the tournaments and the tournament timelines for when you can start to see those coming onto the calendar. And we'll then go on to be talking about how our focus is for the next season and how that will manifest itself. So I think, as Kevin said, 3 years ago, COVID hit, everything stopped. And since then, every year we've been trying to get back to where we were pre-COVID. And I think what this slide shows is that we're kind of there. So this slide shows you all the different junior tournaments, championships that we have. On the left-hand side, we start with the season 2011-12, and you can see participation numbers as you move through the years until this year, which is the grey bar here. So you can see for the US Junior Open that this year we actually had a record number of participants, which is great. You can see for the junior close that we're flat, which is how it should be. Every division was full. It can't get bigger. Same for the junior silvers. that filled up this year. And the junior bronze, we were seeing a bit of a decline before COVID, but now we're coming back again with the junior bronze championships, which is really good to see. Middle school championships, we had a really good season before COVID. We had a record number of teams, and I think the middle schools have been a little bit more cautious about coming back from COVID, but we can still see an upward trend, and I fully expect that to be back to the levels that it was pre-COVID next season. High schools is kind of already there. We had a very good season. We had, I think it was 187 teams, something like that. So high school squash is thriving. And then we started our interscholastic tournament the year that COVID hit, which is the school tournament for those teams where you have kids from more than one school. So that's going in the right trajectory. This is in fact where high school nationals started all those years ago, and now look where it is now. So we're quite comforted by seeing this, and we think that we've now got a really good platform to go forward into next season. Here we've broken down the number of junior ranked players by age group. And again, you can see here the age groups along the bottom. You can see on the left-hand side, this is a 2018-19 season, the number of players we had in the boys under 11 division. And then you can see over here on the right-hand side, how many players we have this season, how we have had this season. So this is, again, the number of ranked players in the points-based system. What's encouraging about this slide is that the younger age groups are showing pretty good growth. It's pretty robust. And I think anecdotally, talking to the teaching pros, they have got very busy programs, and they've got a lot of younger kids who are participating in squash. So you can see here from the under 17s. Under 17s are doing very well, both the boys and the girls are pretty robust. I think largely due to that's the age group where college admissions becomes very serious. Then you start to see a drop off to under 19s when those offers come in. But again, very encouraging numbers here. I think a very good platform again for us for next season. Where a player's playing, now this is not all of the states, obviously we just picked out some of the, I think, key states here just to see where we are. I think it's interesting, most states are still rebuilding, but as I said, I think the pros, they do have a lot of younger kids who probably haven't started in the point system yet. Anecdotally, again, like everyone is very busy, programs are full. And I think when you look at the overall numbers, we're only about 150 players off of where we were in 2019-20. So again, I think last 3 seasons, something has been changing throughout the season. This time last year, we were looking at changing the divisor back, and so we were still going through that recovery from COVID. And I think from September, we're really back. We have no more changes to make. The system is going, and hopefully it will work and players can work their way through it. I'm going to hand over to Harry. I think I'd like to explain and just go over what is the points-based system and how is it supposed to work. We get a lot of questions about why can't we have more tournaments at certain levels. I think it's important for everyone just to kind of reset and understand how this is supposed to be, how people are meant to play in tournaments and how they're meant to work through it. So I'll just hand over to Harry to explain that.
All right, thanks, Kim. At US Squash, we basically aim to provide a structure which allows junior players to participate and develop through multiple levels of tournament. Over the course of the average year for the last couple of years, including the one leading into COVID, we accredit roughly 200 or so junior gold, silver, bronze JCT tournaments over the course of a year, all across the country. So ultimately, the system that we have in place is a points-based system, which means that players need to participate in these tournaments in order to earn themselves ranking points. Those ranking points are then used to help inform or to fully inform player rankings and their qualification into these tournaments. We have what we refer to as a pyramid structure. So looking at this graphic off to the right of the screen, the bronze level is the base of the pyramid. So this is effectively your entry level and more localized competition. and this would effectively cover the base of our playing community. As players increase their interest and their involvement in the sport, they would effectively move up through the various levels of tournament up to silver, gold, JCTs and nationals, and then potentially one day represent Team USA in any international competitions or team events. The structure is intended to allow players and to move up through the ranks as they earn their way into the higher level tournaments. So in order to accomplish that, we overlap the various points tables for each level of tournament. So by that, what I mean is players who are successful in a silver level of tournament, they're going to be earning more ranking points than players who are finishing at the bottom of the gold level tournaments, which is just the next step up. So going to what Kim said a second ago about a very common question that we get is, we want more tournaments. There should be more JCTs, more high points earning tournaments. And ultimately, because we have a points-based system, the number of tournaments and especially the number of tournaments at each level needs to be a reflection of the size of the community. Ultimately, one of the benefits, or there's a lot of benefits to the points-based system, but one of the major one is it does direct players of similar abilities into the same levels of tournaments, so as to provide a more beneficial tournament experience for all players, where you're more likely to come across players of similar abilities, therefore allowing yourselves or the players to have a more developmentally beneficial experience. There is a lot of nuance. We understand that the rule book for the junior system is quite long. And that's just, all these rules did stem from just experience, feedback, our own experiences over the past 15, 20 years where this system's been in place. We understand that there is always room for improvement, and, through conversations with coaches, pros, players, their families, we're always eager to solicit feedback, to have these conversations, and hopefully continue to improve on the system year over year. But some of the other benefits that we've noted over the couple of years, especially one, it's always a big question about ratings versus points. But the added transparency of points, where player ratings, although can be a strong long-term gauge of a player's ability, ratings tend to move fairly slowly, and be a little bit of a black box in terms of how exactly they're derived and how they move up and down. Whereas points can allow more rapid mobility for players who have a series of recent successful tournaments or strong performances. The exact point values are listed in a points table, so players can very, very clearly understand how their point average is determined. And again, it does allow us to kind of direct players of similar abilities into those same level tournaments. Each tournament has slightly different structure, which reflects, the level of the tournament and what we believe to be the players' willingness to basically commit full weekend. So bronze levels, that entry level local tournament, tends to be a one-day tournament. Silver tournaments 2 days, and once we get to gold and JCTs, we're talking Friday, Saturday, Sunday tournaments, or 3-day events, and often potentially cross-country travel. But we do ultimately, in terms of determining where these tournaments are hosted and how many in each region, these are a reflection of the size of the communities. We want to make sure to offer playing opportunities at each level in each area of the country. That doesn't necessarily mean each city, but we do try to offer these opportunities on the West Coast, across the central states of the country, so that no one really needs to travel too far. We understand that travel is a requirement at these higher level tournaments, But offering these playing opportunities is a major goal of ours and purpose for this system in terms of the way it's set up. So Kim, anything else I left out or you wanted to add on the structure?
Not yet. Let's go to the next slide, which talks about the number of tournaments that we have and why it looks like it does.
Yeah, so going back to that general allocation, it really starts with that JCT level. So these are our national team selection tournaments, the highest points earning tournaments. I guess we could include nationals and the Junior Open into this category as well. Junior Open's a little bit different because of the international component, but these offer the highest points earning tournament. So one of the questions is, at that highest level, effectively, if we're talking 1 through 32 in the country, how many times is it fair to ask players to effectively travel and participate in these tournaments? At the moment, we're at 5 JCTs, 1 Junior Nationals, 1 Junior Open. So that's seven tournaments, in addition to any other types of squash programming that these players might be participating in, potentially Team USA events and programming or other PSA events. As you'll see in a couple slides, one of the potential considerations into the future is, whether or not this number stays the same, increases or increases. So from there, we go out to the gold tournaments and effectively fill out the rest of the calendar. We want to make sure that there's a balance between number of golds on the East Coast, West Coast, and Central. And by balance, I don't mean 1-to-1 proportionally. Ultimately, the vast majority of the junior community, this junior squash population, is located between Washington, D.C. all the way up to Boston. There has been impressive growth in areas outside of the East Coast, and we're excited for that growth to continue and to support that growth. But as I said, ultimately, these are structured, the allocations and the overall structures based on is a reflection of the size of the community. So I believe right now we're at 6 summer golds across the country, in all regions of the country. And then during the regular season, as defined from starting in September through the end of May, I think there's 25 gold tournaments that were hosted around the country this past season. And then from there, we increased the number of silvers. So, thinking regional competition, anyone playing at that silver level should have the opportunity to stay within several hours of a trip from home in order to find a silver tournament for themselves to participate in. And I think this past year, it looks like we were just over 70 across the country. This upcoming summer, there's, I think, 26 that will be played. I believe there's currently 24 on the calendar. And then for bronze tournaments, we kind of let the local programs kind of tell us what the demand is for the number of bronze tournaments. We effectively allow them to open that up. Because not all silver tournaments are filling. Oftentimes what we found is that results in fewer bronze tournaments because there's higher cancellation rates, because players will tend to gravitate towards the higher level tournaments that they can get into for one of several reasons. One of them just being more reliable competition. Obviously, some people would want to play in the higher level tournaments for a potential higher points earning opportunity. But sometimes it's just, the security of committing to a tournament that is going to happen. Whereas some bronze tournaments tend to have low participation numbers. But these are largely fueled and driven, the participation, by the local programs themselves. So a specific club hosts it. Oftentimes, a lot of the players in that tournament are affiliated with the programming in that club, which is why we can really, there's no specific limit on the number of bronze tournaments. We just want to make sure that they're on the calendar so that there are opportunities for people to play locally to dip their toe in the water of competitive squash.
Well, let's jump into this next slide, which looks extremely complicated, but it's actually quite helpful in understanding what is going on in the system. In an ideal world, we believe a healthy system would have every division filling at every level. And if that was the case, then we may well have wait lists. We actually think wait lists can be good, as long as the people on the wait list could benefit from playing in the tournament the level below the one that they've entered. And to date, that's always been the case. And if we have divisions and tournaments filling, that means that people will join the system at the bronze level and hopefully have a good experience because it's full of players of similar ability, and they can then move their way through the system as they get better. So the sign of a healthy system for us is where divisions are filling. But what this is showing is, is that the case this year? Has it been the case this year? So you can see here, on this axis, you've got the number of players. So, and here we have ranking. So for instance, here we're looking at the highly ranked players are only playing in JCTs. This line here, which you can see my mouse, is shows you who's playing in JCTs, what ranking is playing in JCTs, how many of that ranking are playing in JCTs. So it's not surprising that the highest ranked players are playing in JCTs. And you can see that as they go down to the 25 to 32, they're also playing in golds. And that kind of makes sense because that's where the crossover in points is. If you do well in a gold, you'll qualify for JCT. So this line here is, we like that, it's pretty healthy. You can see it's kind of got an end to it. So that if you're ranked down at the 60s, you may be lucky to get into a JCT, but generally you're going to need to be ranked in the 40s to be able to get into JCT. And that for us is, that's great. We like that. Then we have this line here in kind of a yellow. This is the gold participation. So here you can see people playing in gold start up here at about 7 or 8 in the JCT. They may well be playing in a gold that's maybe in a higher age division. I haven't taken that piece out of that yet, but you can see that these guys are playing in golds. Mainly the gold players ranked, 30s here, probably down to about 100. It's probably about right. It's probably what we kind of expect and would want. But then you can see it coming down. It doesn't really end, right? It keeps kind of trailing off. And so you can actually get into the gold. You're ranked 200 in the country. And that's not really what we want. And what that's showing us is that there are divisions that are not filling. And so, Harry was talking about that earlier with the silvers. But, if divisions aren't filling, people tend to gravitate to a tournament that they can get into, or the highest level tournament they can get into. That doesn't necessarily provide them with the best experience, because that means that your playing level or your disparity in playing level will be greater, and it may not be such a competitive match. So we'd like to see these filling, we'd like to see this gold kind of finishing, and then the silvers beginning and overlapping. And here you can see the silvers are starting quite high up in the rankings, but generally speaking, around this 100 to 150 mark is where people are playing silvers down to maybe 200. But again, there's another long trail here, because these are not filling too. And then you can hardly really see the bronzes because everyone is playing in golds and silvers. That you can kind of see it, but it's not really what we'd like to see. We'd like to see that starting probably somewhere around here and then coming up and finishing down at the end of the rankings around the 300s. So what is this telling us? It's like the system is almost there. We could do with a few more players playing in it for the size of the divisions that we have and the number of tournaments that we have. This reminds me of 2019, 2020, when we made some changes to the system. And I think I'm confident that next season we'll start to see those divisions fill, and we'll see those defined beginnings and ends for each level of play. So I think we're in a good place, as I said, pretty healthy in the way the system is working. And next year, I think it will just be even better. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So Harry, I'd like to explain when people can start to see tournaments on the calendar next season.
Yes. So we've just effectively wrapped up the summer schedule for this upcoming summer. We know that we've been a little bit behind, so we apologize for that. And one of the main goals will be to get the tournaments on the calendar as soon as possible. We know that coaches, pros, families, parents need this information as early as possible to set their schedules and plan their competition schedule around the rest of their lives. That information will be up much earlier. So although the summer schedule says complete, there might be, I think there's one other silver tournament that's yet to be added, and then there's going to be 1 or 2 bronze tournaments in July and August, which are yet to be added as well. Moving into next season, the JCTs, the Junior Open, and the Junior Individual Championship, so the Junior Nationals and the Silver and Bronze Championships, are currently on the calendar with all the information that we have available for those. At the moment, I believe signups for those will be opening in the next couple of weeks, but so those are currently confirmed. The gold tournaments from September 23 through May 24 will be added to the calendar before the end of June, hopefully earlier than that. And then we will be using June and July to add the remaining silver and bronze tournaments for the period September 23 through May 24 to the calendar as well. So effectively, the full season worth of events will be on the calendar by mid-July. And in general, there will be a couple of bronze tournaments that are added on an ad hoc basis. But for the most part, we can expect a 95% completion rate for the gold, silver, bronze calendar for the period September 23 through May 24 by mid-July. And then we're going to immediately roll right into the creation of the summer calendar for next summer. So summer 24, starting in September, once we've had a moment to review participation numbers from this past year, and have conversations with some of the tournament directors regarding how the events went this year, if any adjustments are needed into the following summer, and hopefully have that fully completed in December, January timeframe. And then going into this upcoming season, I know this slide says policy updates, but effectively, I think most of these are more just, kind of procedural. So the JCTs, one of the major pushes, and due to a lot of the feedback that we've been receiving over this past season specifically, was concern for missed school days. And these JCTs are massive events, and they take a lot of time to play. The average JCT, I think, has something like 650 matches that needs to be played. So that requires time. So in order to hopefully and help to alleviate some of the missed school days, is to concentrate all of the JCTs for this upcoming season on holiday weekends. So that means we're going to be starting with Labor Day for the Connecticut JCT. Columbus Day is going to be the Philadelphia JCT, the Arlen Specter. We're going to use Veterans Day for the West Coast JCT out in San Francisco. MLK Day, the Mid-Atlantic JCT. President's Day for the Houston JCT. A next question, we put this out there in March, the possibility of potential changes to the US Junior Open. We had proposed, or we were considering, the possibility of extending it from a 4-day event to a 5-day event, and whether or not, if we were to do that, whether the 5th day would be starting it on a Friday or concluding the event on a Wednesday. Based on some feedback received in response to that, we're just going to keep the tournament as the standard structure that we've had over the past many years, and it's going to be a 4-day event starting on December 16th, concluding on the 19th. For bronze tournaments, we've always wanted to offer every single division, so BU 11 through 19, GU 11 through 19. So that can be incredibly difficult based on the number of courts that are in a facility, the size of the community in any given division in that area. So therefore, we've basically allowed tournament directors, and we're going to be working a lot more closely with them in the setup process for their tournament, to basically allow them to choose which divisions of those 10 make most sense for their tournament based on the size of the divisions they'd like to be hosting and the number of players that they'd be anticipating in those tournaments. So effectively, some bronze tournaments might just be on the calendar as a boys and girls U15 division, up to 16 players. whereas some might offer all 10 divisions. So that information will be available on the tournament pages, if not included in the tournament names themselves. And then again, this is more just formalizing a standard that we tried to keep, but we're going to be imposing a maximum 3-match minimum per day. There were a couple instances over this past season where some players ended up playing 4 matches in a day. And we acknowledge that's just too much. In an effort for bronze tournaments, it's going to be potentially, if there's 16 players, that does mean 4 matches. So that'll be a conversation between us, the tournament director, and potentially having it's weighing the pros and cons of completing a tournament in one day or coming back a second day to play 1 match. So some of those conversations will be between US Squash, the tournament director, and the players themselves as to whether or not they want that to be a 1-day event.
I think maybe it's worth just adding that the size of a tournament dictates how many courts that are needed to play that tournament. And so, like a gold tournament, Harry, I think it needs 12 courts to play if it fills. Is that correct?
12 courts for about 225 players. Once we go up to like the 230, 240, we need 14 or so.
Right. And so then when somebody asks for a gold tournament and they've got 4 courts, well, then we're going to need to find another 8 to 10 courts to play that tournament on. So sometimes we're limited in where we can put tournaments because we don't have the courts to play them out. So there is a balance here too. For the division sizes and the number of venues, people tend to like fewer venues. So Harry, do you want to just quickly discuss some of the things that we have been discussing? That no decisions are made on this, but it's interesting for you to know what we're thinking about.
Yes. So this section for discussion, these are just kind of ongoing conversations that have been, over the past 5-6 years, regularly brought to our attention. We always discuss them and how implementation could work, and it's also understanding the competing priorities of people in our families in our community. So, in an effort for this first bullet point, adjusting division sizes to minimize school absences. This is, for JCTs, we're able to help with that by targeting holiday weekends. But for some of our larger tournaments, if we have 32 player draws, that's a 3-day tournament, which would mean Friday needs to be played or Monday needs to be played. So for that one, the question would be whether or not, we start to max out division sizes at 16 players as opposed to 32 or 24 to allow for fewer missed school days across all levels of tournaments. The concept of wildcard positions has come up in many different senses over the years, and this one's really tricky to find out an appropriate solution to, because the junior system does require players to participate to earn their way up to higher levels. So this is effectively, if players are injured for a duration of time and they need to step away from squash competition, should they be required to start at the bottom and re-earn their way or work their way all the way back, or is there some type of wild card option? And the same thing would apply for high caliber international players who are entering the system, either coming for boarding school or if they're just coming for, a brief stay to play some tournaments. And this last one for ranking calculation. As we said, one of our goals is to have mobility in the rankings. We believe that the points-based system allows for that mobility, but most of that mobility is currently in that upward direction. So the question is how to allow for that downward mobility in the event that players aren't maintaining the level of results that their ranking is based off of, because the way the rankings are structured is it's an average of your top 4. So if a player, effectively a player's ranking can be anchored to results from 11 months ago. So therefore, if players are moving up, but players aren't moving down, you end up with bunchings right in the middle at specific inflection points, which can be difficult. So this one, again, is tricky. It's come to our attention many times. We discuss it quite frequently. But the tricky thing is going to be finding that sweet spot where you allow for that downward movement without being overly penalizing.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat here, which we should address now before we go on to what's going to happen next season. And I'm going to ask you then, Harry, as you are in charge of the accreditation calendar. Someone from California, from Sports Drive, is asking, there's only 2 bronzes in California. So could you explain more how that bronze accreditation works?
Yes, so there will be some bronze tournaments added to the calendar in San Francisco. The way the accreditation process works is we basically send an email out to all tournament directors that regularly host tournaments or who have come to us and expressed an interest in hosting junior tournaments. And we ask them to basically let us know if they're interested in hosting during a specific time window. So for what we're talking about right now, the summer 23. And for San Francisco specifically, after they've been approved, then we wait for the tournament form to be submitted so that we can add the tournament to the calendar. One of the tournament directors in the Bay Area, I was emailing with today, just waiting on that final piece to be able to add the tournament to the calendar, which will be in July. And then another tournament director in the area, who I was also emailing with today, we're just trying to find the final date where it will be hosted, where it most makes sense. And there's also a silver tournament. That final silver tournament I was talking about is going to be in the Bay Area, I think in early July.
I think the thing with bronze tournaments is that they are largely driven by the tournament directors and local pros. And so if you are looking for bronze tournaments, it would probably be very productive for you to talk to those local tournament directors and ask them if they're going to host them. And then they can get in contact with Harry and we can set something up on the calendar. Another question about using colleges as venues for JCTs. I think we are using colleges for JCTs where it's appropriate. Last year we used Harvard. This year we're using UVA. Difficult to use Yale, I think, at the moment. They're not very accommodating for us, I don't think, at the moment. But yeah, we're not excluding colleges. We're also using Penn for the Philadelphia JCT. So we are using the colleges. We try to find those venues that have the most courts. One last question here. Are you finding players are burning out more than earlier years with all of this year-round play? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Harry.
I would say it's something to keep an eye on. It's hard to measure burnout. I would say at the very least, our top 100 players, we don't seem to be losing many players in that top, let's say 100 ranking category. I would say that in the older age groups, and this is fairly anecdotal, I think during COVID, many players moved to an outdoor sport, a sport that they could continue. And if you're in those key years where you are starting the college application process and you need to find kind of what your extracurriculars are and trying to distinguish yourself, it's hard to spread yourself too thin. So I think that we did lose a lot of players in that age category. So let's say the 15s and 17s during that 2021 season, because their attention was focused elsewhere into something that could help them in their college process. And then I would say just historically, there's always been a little bit of a pullback in participation numbers from the 17s into the 19s, mostly once players kind of figure out what their plans are post high school. But I wouldn't say that burnout necessarily is something that keeps or is referenced too frequently, I would say, in conversations I'm having.
I think if anything, people are wanting more tournaments added to the calendar. And I think with the advent of squash developing outside of the Northeast, where it's not tied to boarding schools or to scholastic play, that I'm finding kids in Houston and on the West Coast that are playing year round, and they want opportunities to play year round. So it's interesting, it's changing, and we just need to keep observing and seeing whether how we should react to that, or if we should react to that. That's a good question.
And I think something that's also tangentially related to that is just monitoring kind of rates of injury. I think that is tied to burnout. I think it is tied to overuse and or overtraining. So obviously, with us accrediting these tournaments and supporting our tournament directors in the administration of these tournaments, we do receive these doctored notes as players need to pull out mid-tournament and or pull out in the week leading up to the tournament. So all these things are tied together, and is definitely important to continue to monitor.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about what we can look forward to for next season. We've alluded to COVID a lot today, and I think that next season is one for us to now really concentrate on improving the experience. The point system is back, and now what can we do to make it better for the players and for you, the parents, and for the tournament directors too. So a lot of what we're going to do will focus on that piece rather than the point state, the structure, let's say. We're going to look at referee education. I think when we look at a survey, we send a survey out after every tournament, and without fail, every single tournament will have someone who says that the refereeing was bad. My daughter lost a match because of a bad referee. The referees weren't concentrating. The referees didn't know the rules. So clearly, we've got some work to do to try to improve the refereeing and the education for our kids who are doing the refereeing. Also, bear in mind, though, they are kids and they are learning, so they will make mistakes. But that doesn't mean that we can't try to improve their level and make sure that the matches are played fairly and the outcome is fair. They're going to be looking at actually enforcing the rules. We talk about, you should share the ball during the warm-up, you should play safely, you shouldn't throw your racket. Well, we're going to be looking at how we can enforce that those things actually do happen, and that play is safe and it is fair, and the right outcome is made, and that we appreciate conduct and sportsmanship. So we'll look at that on the next slide, what that actually means. We also want to really improve that first experience. And I think many of you on this call have been playing for a while, so your first experience is way in the past. But we really want people to start the sport and stay in the sport. When we look at the data of how many people play in one tournament and then don't play in anymore, that percentage is way too high. And I think that we can do a lot and work a lot with our tournament directors to help make that onboarding into any competitive play, should that kid want to play competitively, make that a lot less intense. I don't think the first experience should be a bronze tournament. We can work the tournament directors in their clubs to gradually get the players playing in tournaments, understanding how to read a draw, how to do their club locker profile. So we're going to work a lot with the tournament directors at that grassroots level, and we hope that we'll retain more kids in the sport, and those that want to can then go on and play in the point system, and they can maybe aspire to play for Team USA one day. In terms of the enforcement of the rules and conduct, we all have a part to play in this. No one is excluded. So that means that we have a part to play, but we can't do it all. We can't solve the problem without the help of everybody else in the community. We need the coaches to be on board. We need the officials to be on board. And we need you, the parents, as well. We need to all be saying the same thing to the kids, and we all need to be behaving in the same way. And if we can do that and we're all together, then I think we can make a massive improvement in the sportsmanship and conduct that we see at our events. And if we can do that, then I think that also improves the experience. We let the players play, we let the right person win in the right way. And what does that really all mean? I think if we look at the kind of journey that a kid has in the tournaments, we've got I've got here practice, education part. we've talked a lot to the coaches recently about what we think the right way to play is. And we need to make sure the coaches are all teaching that in their lessons and they're reinforcing how we would expect players to behave. But when it comes to the tournament, the officials need to be making sure that that is actually happening. And so if a player is not playing the right way, there needs to be some conduct that's issued. And then hopefully that will be remedied. But also, if somebody continues to have bad conduct, then we as US Squash, we need to enforce what we have said we were going to do. We have a disciplinary committee. If anyone is reported to us, we discuss that in the disciplinary committee. That can end up in getting a conduct letter. It can end up in suspension, depending upon the severity of the issue. And if we then talk to the coaches and say, hey, your kid was reported to us and this is why and this is what we're doing, then we go back full circle back to that education. And that way we can hopefully start to have an iteratively better experience at tournaments. The rules are enforced properly, the match is played fairly. So I don't know if you all know, you probably don't know all the rule book, but rule 15.5 is really core to how we think the game should be played. It should be played in manners that's unfair or dangerous, abusive or offensive in any way. So that is the core of what we want to make sure our kids know, that our coaches teach, and that you also as parents can back that up as well. We're going to produce posters, produce more messaging around what exactly is the expected behavior for the kids on court, for the referees off court, for the spectators off court, for the coaches. And if we are all agreeing that this is how we should all behave, then we can self-police some of the tournaments, and we can start to improve what is, and have consistency in what you can expect wherever you are in the country, whatever level of tournament. So you can expect to see more expectations around that, more messaging, more posters around the clubs. We're going to be advocating to our tournament directors that really we should be starting the tournament at a conduct warning. Everybody should know what the expectations are of their behavior. And if for any reason they start to talk back to the referee, that should be an instant conduct stroke. And if we enforce that around the country, then I think we'll start to see some change of behavior quite quickly. People should know how to behave. These are some points here, some examples of what we'll be looking out for. There is absolutely no reason for a racket to leave your hand unless it's, you've got a sweaty hand. There's no reason for you to sling a racket at the end of a match because you're upset that you lost. There's no reason for you to speak to an official other than asking for clarification. There's no reason for after you saying, please, to start kind of berating the referee, trying to influence what the decision is. So if that happens, again, conduct stroke. There's no reason for you to shout in every single time you win a point. I think it's great. There's obviously passion. We don't want to get rid of passion in the sport, but after every point is excessive. So those are just some examples. There are many more examples, and we'll make sure to be telling you what those are so that you can also help set those expectations. As I said, we have a disciplinary subcommittee. If you see something, you need to report it. So every single tournament page now has a conduct and sportsmanship page on it, the information page, and there are links there for how you can report conduct, but also how you can report good sportsmanship. You want to celebrate the good and reward the good, and then we want to make sure that we educate those who are not. So if you don't report it though, then we can't do anything. If you see something, please report it, we investigate and we'll take appropriate action. In terms of actual education of our kids and our junior players, we at US Squash will be updating the referee exams this season, and we'll also produce an officiating clinic, which will encourage our pros to give at clubs. We'll also do some centrally too. So I think if we start to do all of these things, we should be really improving the experience for everybody at a tournament. And this is a season to start when we're very focused on doing that and making those improvements. And that's all I have for you tonight, but I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. So looking at the chat here, please put them in the chat and we can then answer them. Has anyone got anything? So someone here is asking about any disciplinary action for excessive blocking. Yeah, blocking is one of those things that's on our things to go straight to a conduct stroke. Players have to get out of the way of the ball they hit, and players need to go to the ball directly. So if there's excessive blocking, or if people stand over that, if they stand over their ball, yes, that's definitely an example of something that we got to be improving. And it's something the coaches can help with too. Because it's dangerous, as you say. Let's see. How can US Squash encourage coaches not to walk in front of referees during play? My experience as a coaches who are the worst offenders. Well, we do have a good dialogue with the coaches. I think the coaches should set the example, as you say. We need to make sure that everybody agrees on how this should be. There's an ongoing conversation with the coaches on that one.
Sorry, I would also add to what Kim just said. There is, just because someone's a coach does not make them exempt from our conduct process. So, if they are acting in a way where they are intimidating a referee, manipulating or trying to change a referee's decisions and or impeding their ability to ref, like that goes through our conduct process, and they would be treated as anyone else that comes through our conduct process.
I think the interesting question about videos and the use of videos, we're starting to get more videos that are submitted by parents when incidents happen. We do look at them, and it can influence a decision that we might make. We can never overturn the result of a match. Once a match has been called, the match has been called. We can't change the winner of that match. If we get a video that shows something, we can apply conduct after the match is completed. So we say we can't change a call, even if the call would be considered wrong, but we can apply the conduct, and we will apply conduct. Are we removing conduct warning and going straight to conduct stroke?
I think this is going to be an evolution, because ultimately it needs to be, the message needs to get across to every single player, every single parent, every single coach, tournament director, and how that's implemented. We're definitely going to start making strides towards, like, starting with those three things that on one of the slides that Kim just showed: throwing your racket, arguing with referees, and excessive cheering. Those are the three very, very big ones that we were constantly reported to this past season. Blocking is definitely important. The unfortunate thing with blocking is it can be a little bit more nuanced and difficult to pick up. Obviously, when we get into some very close matches and higher level referees, it's a little bit easier to see and identify and potentially and hopefully manage and prevent. But we're definitely going to be giving directives that these should be looked at and treated as conduct strokes.
Okay, thanks. Just reading the chat here. Hold on. We mentioned coaches holding officiating seminars. Would that be before tournament play starts? I would see our club pros as squash coaches. I'd like them to be giving their officiating clinics within their own clubs, not necessarily before every tournament starts, but certainly I think every club pro has a duty to teach their kids how to referee, and we can help give them some resources to help them do that. So is it possible to have a refresher before every tournament for all players before? I think that would have to be thought through. That could be quite complicated to do. Some pros may want to offer officiating clinics, but I think I'm not sure that it will work because people get there for their match and they don't want to get there too early. But I think those are things that we can think through. How do we make it most effective? And how do we teach our kids and make sure that it's front of their mind what the rules are? And also I think it's important that they, as I said before, they are kids, they are learning, they are not going to be perfect. And I think it's incumbent upon us as adults to help teach the kids if they're doing something wrong. If you're at a tournament and you see there's an issue, you should always go to the tournament director and ask the tournament director for help. And we hope that the tournament director can then come over and either help those kids make those calls, or they can take over the refereeing depending upon what's happening in that situation. If someone gets a conduct in one match, do they get a conduct point game in their next match? No, they don't start. Just because you play badly, you had a conduct in one match, you get that applied to that match. You don't start the next match with the conduct down. You'd start that match on the same footing. Hopefully you behave better because you learned your lesson in the previous match. Are we removing the warning? Are we removing the warning? I think, as Harry said, and we talked about this earlier about analogy to speeding, right? We're going to encourage our tournament directors to start awarding conduct strokes for these behaviours that we don't think are what we should be paying. But that doesn't mean that everyone is going to do that. So we hope that they will. We hope conduct strokes will be applied in the right way, in the right time. They may not be, and I think it'll evolve as we go through the season. I think there are a lot of different scenarios here. You know, and some of it is nuanced. You know, if you break a racket, if somebody cries, I think you need to be at the match. You need to assess the situation, assess the severity of what's going on, and apply conduct appropriately. So there is a degree of common sense that needs to be applied here too. You know. Are there any other questions about anything else that we've spoken about tonight? Well, you all know, I think you all know Harry and me. I think you've all got our email addresses. Many of you have our cell phones. So if you have any questions and you would like to follow up with us directly, then please reach out to us, and we're happy to talk to you or get on a call to discuss some of your particular issues. Thanks everybody for taking the time tonight.